Hey guys, this is Mark Beauclair, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you Job chapter 11. Job just finished his response to Bildad, and now we see the third and final friend, Zophar, about to give his response to what Job just said. We won't read all of the verses in today's chapter, but I do encourage you guys to go back and read the rest of it. So let's get started and go in verse 1. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, should not the multitude of words be answered? And should a man full of talk be vindicated? Should your empty talk make men hold their peace? And when you mock, should no one rebuke you? For you have said, my doctrine is pure, and I am clean in your eyes. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips against you, that you would show the secrets of wisdom, for they would double your prudence. Know therefore that God exacts from you less than your iniquity deserves. Can you search out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limits of the Almighty? They are higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol, what can you know? And their measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. So what we see is Zophar, he appoints himself as God's spokesperson, and he responds to Job in a scathing way. He's pretty much sat by, he's listened to everything that the other two have said, as well as what Job has said. And now he's just like, okay, I'm heated about Job's defense of himself. He's basically saying all of the things that you've said, they are arrogant and they're prideful. So he's saying all of that talk, it won't justify you. I don't believe you. He already had an idea of what he thought was the truth. And now he's like, Job, nothing that you say is going to stop me from thinking that. And he thought that Job was in the situation because he thought that Job was in it because of sin. He deserved judgment because of sin. And he says in verse 6, he basically says, you ought to be thankful that you aren't worse off. Now, there's a problem with this thinking, though. The problem is that he's condemning Job without all of the facts. And what we call it now is judging based off of appearance. It might have looked like Job was in this situation because of some sin, but we know that that was not true. And also, he was viewing suffering from human perspective that overlooked God's divine plan. We do know that some people suffer because of some wrong that they're doing, but in Job's situation, this was not so. It was all because of God's divine plan. And also another example of that was Jesus. Jesus did not sin, but he suffered. He suffered for all mankind. So that thinking does not always go with everything that God does. And also we know that God uses suffering sometimes for maturing people spiritually. So you can go through certain things. In Romans chapter 5, verse 3 through 4 says, suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. So what we see is that all of these different things, they build you up, because once you go through them, you go through suffering, you have to persevere. You have to go through it each and every day, and it builds up that endurance. Also, perseverance, it builds up your character. And lastly, character gives you hope at the end of all of this stuff. You know that you can get through anything that comes your way because you have God who loves you. You have God who protected you and who took you through all of that stuff. Now, the remainder of the chapter is Zophar speaking false doctrine. Now, what we see him saying is similar to the prosperity gospel. It tells you, oh, well, if you do this, then you get this. It's all about the health, wealth, and the prosperity. And the problem with that, it sounds good, but it misrepresents God's word and who God is and what he's doing, because God never promised those things that Zophar said or the people in prosperity gospel that they say. The second thing is, he never said that Job was suffering because of sin. If you go back to the first chapter, it says that God said he was blameless and that he was upright. So he just misrepresented everything that God said, and he was looking at it from his own view instead of the sovereign God that was having all of this stuff go through it. God had a plan, even if Zophar didn't know it, and even if Job didn't know it. So God checks Zophar later on in the book of Job for misrepresenting his words. And he says, my wrath is aroused against you and your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, or my servant Job has, as my servant Job has. Now, finally, in this chapter, one thing that it teaches us is to have the way not to do things as far as compassion. Because what Job needed in this time was encouragement. He didn't need somebody to condemn him or anything else, as well as other people who go through certain things in life when they suffer. Now, instead of condemning without all of the facts, our response to people that go through certain things like this or that go through hard times is we need to say, I don't know why you're suffering. Just know that I'm sorry and that I'm praying for you. I also want you to know that God is in control and God has a perfect plan for all of this stuff. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be physically, as far as blessings later on. It doesn't mean that he's going to give you physical blessings or anything like that. But it does say that he will give you better character and endurance, perseverance, all of these certain character things that are of the spirit that you need to probably flush out, or it might be for somebody else that you don't even know that needed that. God is in control. We don't know why everything goes on, but I want to encourage you to trust God throughout this hard experience. So that's the way that we need to respond. So the two things that we need to learn by this is don't judge based off of speculation. Speculation is not what we need to be looking at, because God says don't judge based on appearance, but judge off of a righteous judgment. And also, we need to be compassionate. Whenever you see somebody going through something, they don't need a hard word. They need somebody to encourage them, because that is a hard time to get through. So I just pray that this was a great lesson today, and I pray that your day is awesome. Have a great day.